The mission of Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity is to create, preserve, and promote affordable home ownership and to create equity in housing in the community. And I think that that's critically important that we don't separate out those two goals. There was a report about 2 decades ago that talked about the impact of the inequality and how even though we thought in Minnesota we were somehow special, we had it was better than it was in other places, we realized all of a sudden we had some of the worst disparities in this community compared to any other community in the country. We had the greatest gap in home ownership. We had the greatest gap in educational achievement, the greatest gap in income. And so all of a sudden we were confronted with the reality that we're not the community that we pretended that we were.
Home ownership is a whole nother animal. Oh, you have history, really historical racism. It's just embedded into our housing systems. I've been with Habitat for a little bit over 3.5 years. When I announced that I was coming to Habitat, the question was, well, why Habitat? The community perception was that they didn't serve our Black community, that they really did target our immigrant community. And I thought there was an opportunity for me to take a deeper dive into that perception. But once we got deeper into the data, it was pretty much confirmed that historically, this affiliate who's been around for 40 years haven't served many foundational Black home buyers. Foundational Black is defined as any Black person who are descendants of the enslaved.
Over 85% of our families, the families that we get into home ownership, were families of color. But all of a sudden, when we disaggregated that data, we realized that for foundational Black households, that figure was closer to 9%. So even though they were one of the largest groups of families applying into our program, they were one of the lowest rates of successful completion of home ownership.
Black is not Black. You see, just because I have Black skin, and if you have my East and West African sister or brother with Black skin, you just make the assumption that our journeys are the same, and they're not. They're very opposite. Habitat didn't quite understand that the journeys are very different.
Foundational Black households are not graduating their program at the same rates of any of their peers, male or female, across racial or ethnic groups. And it was very dismal, and they recognized that. So they reached out to us because they wanted us to partner with them to do an engage evaluation project that helped them reimagine their homeownership and financial coaching program, and also authentically engage with community in a way that brought folks in who weren't benefiting.
The American dream is about owning your own little portion of it, right? I want to make sure that I'm establishing a legacy for my family, generational wealth. The reason I chose to pursue the Habitat for Humanity program is because it seemed to be a program that is there to assist all community members. My background ranges from the medical field to corporate to nonprofit. I had made multiple attempts going in directly to financial institutions to apply and being denied, even though my credit and my debt to income ratio was well within the eligible requirements. There's a disconnect here. I don't exactly know what it is. I don't know the verbiage, but something's not right. And so Habitat for Humanity seemed to be that bridge in regards to getting community members or constituents into homeownership without having to worry about discrimination and those other factors that can play a part. When I first reached out, I actually was a recipient of 2 of my nieces. Habitat for Humanity, I thought, would aid my family in what we needed. And unfortunately, I wasn't approved to go forward in the program because there was a resource with the county. And those payments were not eligible to be counted as income.
Folks talked really openly about the need for a staff culture, I think, to grow in their deeper awareness around the realities of both single Black motherhood, around coaches not actually knowing who they are, both their history as a people, but then also the types of different decisions that these mothers are having to make as a result of managing multiple jobs, kids, discordant relationships, a number of things that make them who they are, and also makes them feel judged for being who they are.
My nieces we were able to get additional resources for them where I was able to be auntie and not house all of them. And then just moving on with my life and my career development, things of that nature, I applied to Habitat for Humanity again. I wasn't receiving that type of income, and so therefore I thought, here, let me go again. I have a significant amount of money saved up for a down payment. Like, I know for sure that I'm ready. I was moved to the next step, which I was so excited, like, okay, here we go. And then we get to, I believe that step was called the financial advising, and I was again disappointed. My financial advisor, we met like twice, and then I just hadn't heard from him. And in the midst of that, I was reached out to see if I had interest in joining the advisory committee, and I'm like, absolutely.
The Homebuyer Advisory Council was formed because Dr. Brittany Lewis wanted to take a more human-centered engagement. She wanted to hear from those who have had direct experience with us, and that was important because we needed to hear their voice.
It was very triggering for me because of needing to talk about what I had been experiencing and how Habitat for Humanity, I thought, was a oasis for humans to be able to get that American dream and get that handheld, if you will, to have the disappointments that I have had, and then needing to then talk about it and explain to people how it feels to be treated a certain way just because of how you look. Your background has nothing to do with it. Your education has nothing to do with it. Institutionalized racism hits all of the agencies.
Half of our work as people work has nothing to do with research. So when you reset the table, you have to ensure that those folks that have differential power don't outnumber the community. You also have to determine who has left the table in the past and needs to come back to the table. And how can we make that happen? So we reset the table.
That was a breakthrough that we did more harm. And how do we undo that harm? We have to fix the things that have caused harm. And that's taking a closer look at our service delivery model.
There should be a permanent advisory committee established with Habitat for Humanity when participants have been told that they don't qualify or that they're not able to move forward. Those need to be screened through the advisory committee, and it needs to involve community stakeholders that are minorities, that are different walks and backgrounds of life, that can make sure there's a multi-lens look at the participants that are coming here, because people come to Habitat for Humanity for solace. They come here feeling like this is going to be the place that will either get me where I'm trying to go or educate me on how to get there.
We have received recommendations from the advisory council. The next step is for us to incorporate those recommendations into the program service delivery model. So we heard directly from them that cohort support is important. Hiring, making sure that we hire folks that look like them. Our homeownership advisors will be going through some human-centered design training, but also taking a closer look at our just the model in general. Like, what steps do we need to keep? What needs to be eliminated? So we're making that experience a good experience for everybody. What would I say to other Habitat affiliates? To not be okay with just easy work. You're gonna have to do some heavy lifting. That means you have to take a closer look at how you do things by understanding who do you serve and where are the opportunities to serve even more.
The notion of purchasing a home is like the kind of oldest notion of wealth building. Ownership is the only place in which you get to manage and control, right, how you utilize an asset for your future betterment.
I think about, I was able to use my home, my equity in my home, to finance my children's education. Here I graduated from college with student loan debt. I see myself in those that we serve because I was there. I learned the hard way. because I just remember just 26 years ago, I was living in a shelter. Imagine that. 26 years ago, I was living in a shelter, and I'm a 2-time homeowner, and was able to use my equity in my home for my kids to go to college. Make the necessary changes to see impact, to ensure that home ownership is possible for everybody. My hope is that we attract, retain, and fulfill the promise of getting that American dream by ways of home ownership.